When Celia asked me to do this, she didn't say anything about a lecture. She said, just be gently amusing for 20 minutes, which is completely different to what I've been told. Anyway, I'm very honoured to be here, and thank you all very much. When I first came to Newmarket, Tattersall's had not quite built the auditorium that you see now. And I came up with a lovely old boy called Maurice Bailey. I suppose I was about 15. And it was foggy, and it was the Horses in Training catalogue, which interestingly, they looked it up for me, consisted of 186 horses, the whole of the Horses in Training catalogue. And Maurice Bailey was a little chap, and he trained pony racers for Dorothy Paget. He was an aggressive little man. And we wanted to see one of Vernon Cross's horses. And there was a lad leading it round, and it was rearing and really a handful. And he was one of those very good lads, but bad-tempered. And he was letting the horse rear up, and then he'd pull him down and so on. And Maurice said, "That's the horse, get that in, get that in." So I said, "Excuse me, could you bring that over to the clock?" And the clock was still part of the old Tattersall. And he brought him over to the clock, and as it got nearer in the fog, I could see it wasn't 286, it was 288. So I said to the fellow, I was only 15 or 16, I said, "I'm terribly sorry, I wanted 286. Well, he said, "You are a blind bastard, aren't you?" He said, "There's a national health for fuckers like you." And that was the first time I came to Newmarket. So whenever I see the clock, I think of him. But, and the yearling sales were much different then. You couldn't return a horse, as you know. And so Mr. Waugh used to look round, my governor, and he would really only look at the studs he knew. And he'd arrive and say to the stud groom, "Now then, Reg, what I need is something for Lady MB, try and win the Queen Mary, and then we've got a staying colt for so-and-so." And he'd just look at the horses that they recommended. And he'd keep walking round all the people he knew, and then we'd go round once more if he hadn't found enough sort of suitable types from his own studs. Then there was the night, that night I then had to go up in the early morning and go into all the boxes to see if there are any box walkers, weavers or cribers. And anything that he didn't like, thought might be a bit thick-winded, or that he didn't know the people concerned, he then used to come up later in the day, just before the lads came, about 5 o'clock, and whack it over its withers to see if it grunted. And then the grunt test, as he called it. And then he left it, and presumably these people were trying to catch the thing the next, an hour later, trying to catch this thing that's thundering around the box. So it was a very sort of, by a very old-fashioned way of doing it. And when the yearlings arrived at Heath House, they were completely untouched by modern standards. And I'm not telling tales, but when Lord Fairhaven's arrived from Barton Stud, the colts used to arrive in one box, and the fillies would arrive in another box. And they would arrive with straw coming out of the ventilation, normally a colt sitting in the front seat with the driver, and Major Critchley Salmonson in the back within a van. And then they'd let them out into my little yard, those of you that see my little yard, and the head lad and I would run around catching the odd one as it came hurtling by. And we'd say, "How's this bred, Major?" And he said, "That's Pirate King." And the stud groom would say, "No, Major, Nelsius." "Well, Nelsius then." So into the boxes they went. And I've often wondered how many of the pedigrees, are as they are, but that's how it is. And Major Critchley Salmonson loathed Mr. Waugh, and Mr. Waugh loathed poor Major Critchley Salmonson. So when this annual event of the horses arriving took place, Mr. Waugh used to say, "That bugger Critchley Salmon's coming. I'm going off fishing. You be nice to him." So I used to say, "Thank you very much, Major," when they were delivered, and I do hope they do well here. And he used to say, "Well, I don't suppose they'll do any good here, will they?" And off he'd drive. And then Mr. Waugh would say, "How is that bugger Critchley Salmonson?" I said, "He asked particularly after you, sir, and said he hoped they did well next season." So there were these terrible wars that we were all involved in. basically nobody stood in the, where we all now stand in the chute waiting for them to go in. Well, nobody stood there, did they? Those of you who are old enough to remember, you'd get killed as soon as look at yourself if you got it. So they were very wild, and it was a very different thing. You couldn't send them back. But now, I have to say that I've always relied on buying off studs that I like, and have always been, if there's been a disaster, it's always been. I bought one off Dear Flash Conroy, and it was late in the sales. It was on Thursday evening, late. Sales were packing up, and we bought this horse, and he lunged fine, and he went off down to Herringswell to Mrs. Coldry, who was a very good horsewoman who used to break our horses in for us, and she was very on the ball. And poor old Flash, he went back to Ireland. I went back to bed. 6 o'clock in the morning, just downstairs, the phone rings. It's Mrs. Coldry. And she says, "Oh, bad news, Sir Mark. I'm afraid the horse that came in last night, it's a good yard away from our bedroom, but we can hear it cribbing and windsucking from our bedroom, you see." So it's now about 5 to 6 in the morning. So I rang poor Flash, who's not been in bed more than about 3 hours. And I said, "Flash, it's Sir Mark here." "Oh, Jesus, Sir Mark, I was hoping it wouldn't be you." I said, "Jesus, I'm afraid it is." I said, "That bloody thing," I said, "I can hear it cribbing from my house, and I'm 8 miles away from where it is." So there was a pause, and Flash said, "Hang on, Sir Mark, hang on." And he said, "Jesus, I can hear him from here." So I've always been very lucky. We came to a deal, and the horse won 2 or 3 races, so everybody got on well. So, but it was, and I've found always that relying on and buying off decent people is very important. I also like to buy off studs, and I'm sure every trainer here will agree, where you think that they do well and they breed winners. And I think that horses can be still improved significantly by the way they're reared. I take this mainly from greyhounds, in that when you breed a greyhound litter, they're all roughly the same ability. It's very rare that there's a litter where there's 2 very good ones and 2 bad ones. They'll all be pretty good, or they'll all be not much good. And when I was breeding greyhounds, I used to send, you separate them at 8 weeks, and 3 would go to Mrs. Peeling in Ely, and 3 went to a very good fellow down in Romford who had lovely wide runs and so on, and his dogs always looked marvellous. And then the 6 of them would go to the same trainer. So it's quite an interesting, you can't do it with horses. So you've got a litter, 3 reared by old Mrs. Peeling. She had a small holding and one of those tractors that you last saw in Bosnia. And the dogs had complete liberty, and, used to call in and say, "Mrs. Peeling, can I see those dogs?" She said, "Oh, yes, Sir Mark. I'll come in on my way back from York." Get there 6 o'clock in the evening. I said, "Now, Mrs. P, where are these dogs?" "Well," she said, "I haven't seen them since 6 o'clock this morning." So they were out chasing ducks and falling over. And anyway, and the fellow who had them in the runs at Romford, they always looked magnificent. They led beautifully. When they went to the trainer, they were the ones he liked. Mrs. Peelings were a nightmare. Trying to catch them was like getting a fox in a hen house, and all that sort of stuff. But hers were always better. Always, always, always better. So there was something about the way she reared them that made them better. And this would have been a 12-year experiment. The only drawback with Mrs. P was that normally she killed one of them. Run it over with the tractor, got hung up in the wire. They never all were there at the end. But they were better. They were better. So I do believe in that rearing is a significant factor. And of course, we've now made sure that there's millions of sales all the time, so that bloodstock agents need never go home. And we now can sell the thing when it's in foal. We sell nominations, and then we can sell the mare, and then we can sell it when it's in foal, and then we can sell the foal, and then we can send it to the breeze up. And then some poor trainer finally gets it, and the excuses are over. It's got to run. But by now, it's been sold 6 times. So Everybody's happy, it's spinning around and it goes jolly well. And then they arrive at the breeze-ups. Now, the breeze-ups, I've been very lucky at them. I hate the breeze-up sales because I know I can make my worst 2-year-old look perfectly respectable for 2.5 furlongs. And it doesn't occur to me that enormously talented Irishmen can't do exactly the same and even better. Their horses look simply wonderful. When I was at the breeze-up sales this year, mine were all coughing and sneezing and covered in ringworm at Heath House. And I get there and they're all looking marvellous in their coats. It's just thank God that those breeze-up people don't have a licence, because us trainers, Stuart, we'd be out of a business with those boys. So I said to them, I said to one of the breeze-up boys, I said, you know, I don't know how you do get these horses looking so well. Thank God you haven't got a licence. I asked Mark, he said, I wouldn't have a licence for long what I do to them. So that won the award for this year's sale. And then, of course, finally, there's the horses in training sale. And this is where I come into my own, because for basically a fairly truthful person, I hear myself at the end of 2 days saying the most unbelievable thing, you know. And I think the worst was Palisator, who you may remember was a ghastly, badly behaved, motivated horse. But he was very, very good. And this is absolutely true. And the day had worn on and people were coming to see him. And this woman came up to me and she said, he's such a lovely big horse. And my daughter, would he be? I said, absolutely, madam. The ideal. I walked back in the house. I thought, I can't just have said that. I can't. So we all fall victim to, I'm afraid, at the sales to little flights of imagination in trying to get them. And there's another nightmare, of course, at the sales, is that if you're a trainer, we go round and there's various lads holding horses. And I think 3 or 4 years ago, I think I was with Mr. Brummett, and there was a very tall, thin lad with a beard holding this horse, about 26. And I saw the horse walk up and down, and I thanked him very much and said, thank you so much. And he said, you don't remember me, do you? You know, your heart always sinks, doesn't it? Yeah. So I said, no, I'm afraid I don't. He said, I had my first job with you. So I said, oh, how did it go? I sort of sensed danger in the wind. I said, how did it go? He said, not well. He said, 2 of us started the same day, and you gave us a hoe and told us to hoe the cinder track. And when you came back in, you seemed to be in rather a bad mood, and you called us both to you. And he said, now then, Dickie, now then, Harry. And I said, excuse me, I'm Harry, he's Dickie. And you said, don't worry, the way you've hoed that cinder track, I'm never going to learn either of your fucking names. I said, God, how awful, I'm so sorry. He said, it's all right, I'm all right now. So there's that gauntlet that you run of all those people. And then, of course, those terrifying women who said, you know the filly you didn't like of mine last year? Well, it won the Moroccan Oaks this year. You know? So you have to get through that. But I think all of us, the sales, you know, it's a question of opinion and what horse you like. The big change, I think, is that when I was with Jack War, he made me do a summary of this was the very first year, how many races on the flat are run on good to firm ground or firmer. And the answer was 76% were on good to firm or firmer. So he said, the first question you ask yourself is, will it go on the firm? So that ruled out all those long pasterns and things in those days. Fascinating, isn't it? Whereas now, with watering and all weather tracks and so on, those sort of faults that he would have deemed to be faults are now perfectly acceptable and they run really well. And for all of you real boffins, I wonder if 50, 60 years ago, would Sadler's Wells have been as successful as he is? Who knows? But the thoroughbred adapts very quickly, and we have to adapt very quickly too. Though the changes have been nearly all for the better. And just to end on the last thing, when High Flyer sales were built there on where old Mr. Day had Celerio stud and everything, High Flyer sales, they built those new boxes. And it was the end of a very tough week, and you're flogging round and you're getting irritable. And Lyric Fantasy, the pocket rocket, was just about to run. And there was an Irish stud called Riverside Stud, and they had a lad leading up for them who was well known in Newmarket as bad-tempered, bad little so-and-so, who used to work for various studs. And anyway, we went to see this horse, and all of Newmarket was waiting to see Lyric Fantasy run. And this poor fellow said, "Excuse me, just before you go, could we have a look at this horse?" And he said, "Well, Sir Mark," he said, "it's going to have its lunch and I'm going to watch the fucking race." So I could feel myself go. So I just realised I was old and growing up. So I said, "I'll tell you what, we'll split the difference. Rather than have a row about this, you stand it up in the box and I'll have a look at it. How's that?" So he stood it up in the box, yanked it in the mouth. I shut the latch. I said, "Now it'll have its fucking lunch and you won't watch the race."